of the things we've done is we've created in those guides, we have finger puppets you can make. And we have felt board for people that are still doing felt boards. There's a felt board line looking at himself, and oh, there's the butterfly. We'll talk about the butterfly. So we have felt board examples, and I love doing paper bag puppets with the kids. Those are really fun, and we have directions for doing those in the guides, but I'm going to read The Lion Who Saw Himself in the Water. And so I'm going to read this as though I'm reading it for the second or third time, so that we can kind of break up and talk a little bit about it. Because as I said, the first time I read this to a 3-year-old, I'm going to go through the book completely and not stop. But when we start, we'll talk about the title, The Lion Who Saw Himself in the Water. That's the title of the book. And we talk about the word title being the name of the book, the same as the name. And it's by, that's the author. The author is Idris Shah. And my 4-year-old grandson recognizes all the books by Idris Shah now. He knows which ones are which. And the illustrator, it's illustrated by Ingrid Rodriguez. And I will also do a lot of left to right underlining of the words, so that kids begin to learn that the directionality of our language is left to right, as opposed to right to left in some of the other languages like Pashto. And then this is called the end paper. And the end paper kind of usually tells us something a little bit about the book that we're going to be, the story we're going to be reading. We don't have end papers in paperbacks, but we have them in hardback books. And they're usually very, very beautiful pictures. You'll see in the paperback, here's the paperback of the Pashto English version, and you'll see it doesn't have end papers. It just has the title page. So the title page is The Lion Who Saw Himself in the Water by Idris Shah, and the publisher is Hoopoe Books. If I do prediction strategies, which I know a lot of teachers like to do prediction, they go through the book and do like a little quick thing. We don't recommend that with Hoopoe because there are some surprises that happen in the stories. So if you're going to do prediction, you can do it from the cover. And so we could say, well, what do you think the butterfly is going to have to do with the story? What do you think the mouse is going to have to do with the story? What do you think the lion is seeing in the water? Let's find out. And some of the questions that we might ask about this story are about that butterfly. Who's that butterfly? Have you ever had a little butterfly or a little thought whisper something in your ear and kind of try to tell you? And then there's that part of you that goes, well, you know, I have a perfect example. I had borrowed some books from a friend of mine, and they were on the table, and I said, I'm going to take these with me and put them in my car. It just thought came to me, and I said, no, I'm not going to run into my friend Jane, whose books these are. No, I'm not going to do that. You know, like, what am I thinking? Why waste the time? So I got in the car and started driving, went to the grocery store, and who was at the grocery store? There she was. I could have given you your books back. And then, you know, now I know when that butterfly tells me, put the books in the car, I do it. But so I've been reading this book. At this point, I had been reading this book for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years to kids. And I'm in a school in Norwalk, Connecticut, and we're doing a pajama party with the parents and everything. And a 3rd grader says to me, how come the animals can suddenly understand share?
Right. Right.
I had never thought of that. I had never thought of it. I've been reading this and thought I had every little angle, you know. And so I was a good teacher, and I said, why don't you tell me why you think? And of course, at this point, what happens is they start laughing. And humor very often breaks up fear. So one of the questions I think we should ask is, how old do you think Cher is? Susan, how old do you think Cher is?
I think Cher is a young lion because Cher doesn't seem to have met his reflection or her reflection, I'm not sure, in water before.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a new experience. So I think maybe Cher is younger.
Mm-hmm. And most kids will put an age on that. They'll give you an age. They'll say 5 or 8 or whatever, you know.
And how old do you think Cher is?
I agree with you. I think Cher is a young lion. Well, he's got a mane, so he's mature in that sense. He's already got a mane. He's not a little tiny thing, and he must be male because I think it's the male lions that have manes. But I put him at probably maybe 2 or 3, something like that. I think the animals come to begin to empathize with him, begin to care about him, because they see that he's troubled, that he's thirsty, and so they put their head in the water and they drink. Maybe they're hoping that he will too when he sees them drink.
What a beautiful story. And like you say, lots of different connections that children meet with that story.
I like to do a writing experience with them where when we've read the story several times and talked about it, we write the story as a class. And I'll do that with preschool kids. Where I'll write on the board. Somebody will come up with a sentence, maybe a beginning sentence for the story. That's one of the activities we have in the guide. And so I'll write that sentence down for the child exactly as he or she says it. And then I put their initials next to that sentence, because in case when we go back to it, if we want to change it, then the author has to authorize that change. Right. So then we write the whole story out on the whiteboard, and then we read it aloud together. They read it with me, and we read it several times, and we decide whether or not we've missed anything, or maybe some things are out of order and we want to put them in a different order. And then we ask the author if that's okay. And then once it's done, I copy the story and then print it for them for the next day. And they illustrate the story, and we turn it into a book, and we put it in the library. So it's right there along with their own, the copy of The Lion Who Saw Himself in the Water, or they have the copy themselves in many instances. But those books are taken out of the library by children as often as the published books are.
It's something I've noticed too in some kindergarten classes that I've worked in, is that those self-published books, the ones that they have illustrated or they've come up with the plot line, are more or as engaging as a published illustrated book. So are you saying when you do that with children, you're inviting them to either retell the story as is or modify the story, create changes to the story?
Absolutely, all of the above. And by reading it in unison, those who maybe aren't reading at the same level as but it allows them to hear it, and it allows them to kind of practice, what they're reading. And the same thing with the reader sitter. We can't do reader sitter with the little tiny ones, but with the older ones, we give an authentic reason to reread, and also to add voice and to add expression, because we know that good readers will go back to, the older you are, when you're maybe studying for something, you'll go back to someplace on the page to reflect on something, or maybe find a deeper meaning to it, or to remember what it says. And it's children who have more difficulty in reading tend to think once they've read something the first time, that's it, they've read it, they've got it all. So reader's theater is kind of a very nice way to bring about that rereading for authentic purpose. And when we do a reader's theater, when I've done them in classrooms, we'll have some of the kids be directors and some of the kids be scene makers and costume makers, and then we put on a production and video it for the parents.
And I'm thinking in these COVID times, making a video of it makes it accessible to people, to families, even if you can't come in, gather.
You can even do that with everybody on Zoom at the same time. A little more complicated, but it can be done.